trying to make sure that I'm always encouraging and uplifting, and that I'm not kind of demonstrating any of those biases or playing into any of that privilege, making sure that I give the same kind of response to a white student that I would give to any other student. So I think it just raises my consciousness about how I interact, particularly with students. And I also try to think about that not having prejudgments about people, whether it's good or bad, but just having the dialogue with my students and understanding where they come from, and just taking everyone for exactly who they are, who they show themselves to be to me. And also, in another role, I'm also a mom of an African-American son, and so in my role as a mom, I try to make sure that he is exposed to kind of some privileged groups or privileged experiences. But I know that I'm also going to have to prepare him for being treated as a member of an unprivileged group. So I'm trying to balance those two things.
I think that initially I just want to acknowledge that for a very long time, privilege, the concept of privilege and people having it didn't inform my choices and my interactions. I was very blind to it. I was so far deep in it, I took for granted my easy access to college and just all the support resources I had. And it's taken a long time. I mentioned my experiences earlier, feeling like I was being marginalized, but only because of the case of mistaken identity. And I appreciate that experience in the sense that it's given me some exposure, but like I said, at the end of the day, I'm a white woman in America where structural racism has existed forever, since the birth of our country, and the institutions that that govern our very lives that create this barrier that just simply has never existed for me. I think you might have heard my role here is the compliance administrator, and one of the things that we do is work on complaints of discrimination, harassment, retaliation, and human resources. They do affirmative action plans. I think those components are certainly necessary, and I evaluate issues from an objective evidentiary standard, but I know that's not enough. Compliance does not equal diversity and inclusion. An affirmative action plan doesn't give you a workforce that reflects the diversity of the city of Fresno, and I think people in human resources are cognizant of that too, and more has to be done. And I know that investigating complaints and working through those issues is not always satisfying to people, because there are microaggressions that are taking place constantly, and no one's going to usually present me with evidence that she said that she hates black women. That's not going to be there. And oftentimes I can't make a finding, because even though I know that those interactions, they're caused by people thinking they're giving compliments or encouragement, like, oh, you speak English so well, those sorts of comments that people view them, experience themselves as these good-willed, good-natured, caring people, and they just don't even see it. And that's our biggest problem. Microaggression is the biggest affront to, I believe, racial tension now, because we've moved away from blatant racism to microaggressions that are happening constantly. So I am acknowledging my ignorance every day, as it was mentioned in the student panel, and I'm trying to adjust my frame of reference when I look at complaints or people's experiences, because I know my limitations as a white person in this institution, and that I will never be able to fully comprehend the way someone necessarily is feeling. But I acknowledge that it's valid, and I acknowledge that this isn't about white guilt or being a self-hating liberal. This is a real thing, and we need to keep that conversation going.
So back to my story in Marshalls. I did buy something in Marshalls, and as many of you who've been there know, when you get to the cash register, they frequently ask you if you want to save 10% by signing up for a credit card. And so they asked me, and I said, do you ask that of everybody? This notion of privilege has been on my mind for the last couple of months when Dr. Pitt invited me to be part of this panel. So I was thinking, I thought about that as an example of privilege. And her response was, this was a young woman, her response was, only the people that I think will qualify. statement alone was disappointing to me. What was even more disappointing is she was an African-American young lady. And I was thinking, as an educator, a lifetime educator, I was thinking, we have failed in our mission of educating our youth. If we have not only people who can make those kinds of statements, but are contributing to the privilege that they are denied themselves. It was pretty shocking to me. But it was enlightening also in that I think, again, as an educator, I think that education is part of the answer. And like Dr. Pick read, privilege is, or it says here, are designed by engendering obliviousness. We have to erase that obliviousness if we're ever going to attack problems association with denial of privilege. And we can do that through education. And while it may be a bold statement, and I'm open for disagreement, I think that when it comes to white privilege, I think more white individuals need to be making that privilege, bringing that privilege out, surfacing that with other white children. I've read a lot about privilege, especially of late, and more, the more I hear why it stays in obliviousness. And part of it, I think, is that those few that enjoy that privilege, those few that people like myself, are not speaking up to others like myself about it, not making others aware, because it is really, really invisible to so many individuals. So I think education is what's necessary. So when it comes to how to interact with others, I think that's what we need to do. We need to interact through what we teach our youth.
Thank you. So at this time, we have about a 4-minute clip. I don't know, panel, if you guys want to position yourself to see the clip. Because at this point, after the clip, they'll have a 2-minute response of what they've seen.